The beggar turns billionaire in a luxury store? A shocking ending. The story begins. The gleaming chrome and glass of Echelon, a luxury boutique in the heart of the city, resonated with the deep hum of wealth. Sunlight danced on designer handbags and custom-tailored suits, the air thick with the scent of expensive leather and the hushed, formal murmurs of conversation. Sales associates, gliding like well-oiled machines, catered to a clientele that seemed to glow with privilege. Then he walked in. A man, humble in a worn-out hoodie and faded jeans, stepped through the doors. He moved with an effortless grace, his presence both understated and strangely magnetic. The staff, their eyes trained only on the sharply dressed patrons, barely noticed him, until a young saleswoman named Chloe Davis decided he was the perfect target for a little amusement. Chloe Davis, her face adorned with a well-rehearsed mask of charm, decided to make him the store's laughingstock, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Well," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I wonder how someone like you managed to step foot in a place like this." She gestured toward his clothes, her eyes narrowing slightly. The man remained calm, his expression relaxed, a quiet mystery flickering in his eyes. What Chloe Davis didn't realize was that this seemingly ordinary man was none other than world-famous actor Ethan Hayes. The store shimmered, mirrors reflecting dazzling jewelry cases and displays of watches that cost more than a small car. Soft classical music played in the background, a soundtrack to opulence. This was an exclusive space, and those who frequented it knew it. As Ethan Hayes walked in, a few heads lifted momentarily, curiosity flashing in their eyes, but they quickly returned to their previous distractions. Ethan Hayes moved with the unhurried pace of a man who had all the time in the world, examining each item with genuine interest. Running his fingers over the smooth leather of a wallet, twirling a pair of sunglasses in his hand. Behind the main counter, Chloe Davis nudged her colleague, Liam Miller, a smirk playing on her lips. "Seriously," she whispered, her voice sharp with ridicule. "Does he really think he can afford anything here?" Liam Miller chuckled, shooting a glance of contempt toward Ethan Hayes. "Probably lost," he replied, his tone dripping with arrogance. Ethan Hayes continued his quiet exploration of the store, seemingly unaware or deliberately indifferent to the whispers around him. He approached a display of luxury watches, his gaze settling on one particularly sleek timepiece. Encouraged by Liam Miller's laughter, Chloe Davis stepped forward, her smile saccharine and insincere, her voice laced with condescension. "May I help you, sir?" she asked, her eyes flicking disdainfully over his clothes. "You do realize this is the high-end section, don't you?" Ethan Hayes looked up, his gaze warm and inquisitive. "Oh, I see," he responded smoothly. "High-end means expensive, right?" Chloe Davis blinked, momentarily caught off guard by his bluntness. "Yes, exactly," she said, quickly regaining her composure. "I just thought I should let you know, these watches aren't exactly within a limited budget." Across the store, a small group of customers paused their shopping, their attention subtly shifting toward the conversation. Their attention was drawn to the conversation. Whispers spread like wildfire as they observed Chloe Davis's obvious attempt to belittle the man who, in their eyes, looked completely out of place in this temple of wealth. However, Ethan Hayes remained unfazed, picking up the watch under the light, his brow furrowing in genuine admiration. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice filled with real wonder. "You must sell a lot of these." Chloe Davis's smile became strained, her patience wearing thin. "We do," she said pointedly, "to the right kind of customers." Ethan Hayes carefully placed the watch back down, his expression contemplative. "The right kind," he repeated, almost speaking to himself. "Interesting." Chloe Davis crossed her arms, her irritation flaring. "If you're not buying anything, sir," she said, her tone laced with disdain, "we're very busy. Perhaps you could try a more affordable store down the street." The entire store seemed to hold its breath. Customers exchanged confused glances, some visibly uncomfortable with Chloe Davis's sharp words. A middle-aged gentleman whispered to his companion, "That was harsh. She doesn't even know who he is." Ethan Hayes finally turned to Chloe Davis, his gaze locking onto hers. His expression remained unchanged, calm, but now with an underlying steel in his voice. "Thank you for your suggestion," he said smoothly, "but I think I'll stick around. I might surprise you." Chloe Davis rolled her eyes, dismissing him with a shake of her head before turning away. Ethan Hayes continued browsing, moving slowly, deliberately, as if he were piecing together some silent puzzle. Meanwhile, a senior sales associate named Grace Walker observed the scene from behind the jewelry counter. Unlike Chloe Davis, Grace Walker possessed sharp intuition and sensed that there was more to this man than met the eye. She stepped out from behind the counter and cautiously approached Ethan Hayes. "Excuse me," she said kindly, her voice free of judgment. "Is there anything I can assist you with?" Ethan Hayes looked at her and smiled, his expression softening. "Thank you," he said. "You're very kind. I'm just browsing." Grace Walker nodded, her curiosity growing. "Well, let me know if you need any help. Take your time." As Ethan Hayes continued browsing, the tension in the store hung in the air. The echoes of Chloe Davis's condescending tone still lingered, but the energy surrounding Ethan Hayes was one of composure and control. The customers silently watched, wondering how this seemingly ordinary man would respond. But the moment of revelation was closer than they expected. Ethan Hayes continued moving through the store, his demeanor unwavering despite the lingering discomfort in the air. Chloe Davis, now back at the counter, whispered loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "I bet he's just killing time," she said with a smirk. "There's no way someone like him is actually here to buy anything." Liam Miller chuckled, but the customers around them exchanged puzzled looks. Some felt compelled to speak up, but none dared. Ethan Hayes, meanwhile, quietly picked up a pair of sunglasses from a display case, admiring the craftsmanship. His calmness only made the situation more intriguing for those watching. Grace Walker couldn't help but notice Ethan Hayes' poise. She approached him again, her voice warm and sincere. "That's from our latest collection," she said. "Italian craftsmanship, quite exquisite." Ethan Hayes looked at her, a small smile forming on his lips. "They're beautiful," he said simply. "It's nice to see such attention to detail." "Like this." Grace Walker nodded, sensing the genuine appreciation for quality. "If you'd like to try them on, feel free," she said, stepping back respectfully. As Ethan Hayes put on the sunglasses, Chloe Davis glanced over, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Seriously, he's trying them on," she muttered, but this time her whisper carried less confidence. There was something about the way Ethan Hayes carried himself that made her doubt her assumptions. The soft chime of the store's door interrupted the moment as two new customers entered. They were impeccably dressed, a man in a tailored suit and a woman in an elegant dress, and Chloe Davis's demeanor shifted entirely. Her face lit up, and she rushed to greet them with an exaggerated smile. "Welcome," she said brightly. "How may I assist you today?" The stark contrast between her attitude toward Ethan Hayes and these new customers was glaring, and it did not go unnoticed by the crowd. "She's so pretentious," a woman whispered to her companion. "I don't understand how she still works here." Chloe Davis returned to the counter to attend to the new clients, leaving Ethan Hayes to continue browsing. He picked up a sleek leather wallet, running his fingers over its smooth surface. "This is nice," he murmured to himself, as if tucking away the thought. As time passed, the tension in the store grew. Customers began noticing Ethan Hayes and how he was being treated. A middle-aged man in the corner of the room whispered to his wife, "I think I've seen that guy somewhere before." She squinted, trying to place the familiar face. "He does look familiar," she agreed softly, "but why would someone like him be dressed like that?" Chloe Davis, now emboldened by her interaction with the high-spending customers, approached Ethan Hayes once more, her tone sharper. "Sir?" she said curtly, barely masking her frustration. "If you're not planning to make a purchase, I'll have to ask you to leave. We're very busy today." The store fell silent, all eyes now fixed on Ethan Hayes. He gently set the wallet down and looked at her, his expression calm yet unreadable. "You're asking me to leave?" he said evenly. "That's right," Chloe Davis snapped, crossing her arms. "This isn't a place for browsing." Ethan Hayes studied her for a moment, then smiled, a calm, knowing smile that sent a ripple of curiosity through the room. "All right," he said, stepping toward the counter, "but before I go, I think I'll make a purchase." Chloe Davis blinked, slightly caught off guard. "A purchase?" she repeated skeptically. "Yes," Ethan Hayes replied smoothly. "Actually, a few." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black credit card, placing it on the counter with a quiet confidence that silenced the entire store. Chloe Davis stared at the card, her expression frozen in disbelief. Grace Walker, who had been silently observing from the side, stepped forward to assist. "What would you like to buy, sir?" she asked steadily. Ethan Hayes glanced around the store, his gaze sweeping over the shelves. Then he smiled again, locking eyes with Chloe Davis. "Everything," he said simply. "I'll take everything in the store." The words hung in the air, sending shockwaves through everyone present. Chloe Davis's mouth fell open, her smug expression replaced with sheer panic. The room buzzed with hushed whispers, customers exchanging stunned glances as they processed what they had just heard. Grace Walker, though surprised, maintained her composure. "Everything, sir?" she repeated, seeking confirmation. Ethan Hayes nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Everything. And I'd like to donate a large portion of it to the local homeless shelter." Foundation. Chloe Davis's face flushed red as she grasped the gravity of the situation. Customers began whispering louder, some chuckling at the fitting punishment unfolding before them. Ethan Hayes leaned slightly toward Chloe Davis, his voice calm yet firm. "You see, it's not about how someone looks when they walk in," he said. "It's about how you treat them when they're here." The store erupted in applause, customers cheering for Ethan Hayes' unexpected move. Chloe Davis stood frozen, her pride completely shattered. On the other hand, Grace Walker smiled warmly and began processing the order. The moment had shifted from tension to triumph, and everyone in the store knew this was a story they would never forget. The room buzzed with energy as Ethan Hayes' shocking words, "I'll take everything in the store," continued to echo in everyone's minds. Chloe Davis remained motionless behind the counter, her face pale and her confidence shattered. She blinked repeatedly, as if trying to process whether this was some elaborate joke. Grace Walker, the senior sales associate, quickly stepped in, her professionalism shining through. "Of course, sir," she said with a respectful nod, though she was just as surprised. "We'll begin preparing everything for you." Ethan Hayes smiled at Grace Walker, his warmth putting her at ease. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I appreciate your kindness." Meanwhile, the customers in the store whispered excitedly, some pulling out their phones to record the unexpected event. "Did he just say he's buying the entire store?" a woman whispered to her friend. "Who even does that?" another man responded. "I don't know, but I'm glad I stayed to see this." However, Chloe Davis did not handle the situation gracefully. She took a hesitant step toward Ethan Hayes, her voice trembling as she tried to salvage her dignity. "Are you serious?" she stammered, her tone a mix of disbelief and desperation. "You're really buying everything?" Ethan Hayes turned to her, his expression calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. "Is that a problem?" he asked simply, his words cutting through the tension like a knife. Chloe Davis shook her head quickly, her earlier arrogance completely gone. "No, of course not," she said, forcing a strained smile. "It's just surprising." Ethan Hayes' gaze remained steady. "Surprising?" He echoed thoughtfully. "I suppose it is surprising when someone you judged by appearance proves you wrong." The customers murmured in agreement, and Chloe Davis's face burned with embarrassment. She opened her mouth to respond, but found no words. Grace Walker began organizing the logistics of the purchase, calling other staff members over to assist. The store, once filled with silent tension, was now alive with movement and energy. As the employees worked, Ethan Hayes turned to the customers who had watched the entire scene unfold. "I want to thank all of you," he said, his voice carrying through the room. "Moments like these remind us of the importance of kindness, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not." The customers nodded, some applauding in support. A woman stepped forward and said, "You're absolutely right. The way you handled this was admirable. Thank you for reminding us what really matters." Ethan Hayes smiled at her. "It's not about me," he replied humbly. "It's about all of us choosing to be better." As the employees continued packing up the items, Chloe Davis stood awkwardly to the side, watching as her initial dismissal of Ethan Hayes unraveled into the greatest lesson of her career. Unable to remain silent any longer, she cautiously approached him. "Mr. Hayes," she began, her voice hesitant. "Stop," she said. I just want to apologize. I shouldn't have judged you. I was wrong." Ethan Hayes looked at her, his expression softening slightly. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, he said, but remember, apologies are just words unless you prove them with actions. Treat people with respect, no matter how they appear. You never know their story. Chloe Davis nodded, lowering her head. You're right, she said quietly. I'll do better. The atmosphere in the store had completely shifted. Customers continued expressing their admiration for Ethan Hayes, while Grace Walker worked tirelessly to finalize the massive purchase. Yet, Ethan Hayes remained humble, engaging with customers and employees as if this were just another ordinary day. A man who had been silently watching from the corner finally spoke. Do you even know who he is? He asked Chloe Davis with mild amusement. Chloe Davis frowned, confused by the question. Who? She started, but her words trailed off as realization struck. Her eyes widened as she stared at Ethan Hayes, the final pieces clicking into place. You're Ethan Hayes, she whispered. Ethan Hayes chuckled, his humility shining through. That's right, he said simply, but that doesn't change anything. I'm just a person, like anyone else. The room buzzed again with hushed murmurs, customers astonished by the revelation. Chloe Davis, now visibly shaken, mumbled, I can't believe I treated you that way. Ethan Hayes smiled gently. It's not about who I am, he said. It's about how you treat people, no matter who they are. With that, he turned back to Grace Walker, who handed him the final receipt for the massive purchase. Thank you for your patience, she said with a smile. It's been an honor to serve you. Ethan Hayes nodded. The honor is mine, he replied. Thank you for treating me with kindness when it mattered most. As the scene concluded, the energy in the room was palpable. Respect, reflection, and awe. What had begun as an ordinary shopping day had transformed into an unforgettable lesson in humility, kindness, and the power of second chances. The room buzzed with excitement as the staff completed Ethan Hayes' purchase. Luxury goods were stacked behind the counter, and Grace Walker, the kind-hearted sales associate, quietly coordinated the logistics. Ethan Hayes stood near the counter, calmly observing the bustling activity, his presence still commanding the attention of everyone in the store. Chloe Davis stood off to the side, visibly humbled, her earlier arrogance replaced with regret and self-awareness. She glanced at Ethan Hayes repeatedly, unsure how to process the events unfolding before her. Once everything was packed and ready, Ethan Hayes turned to Grace Walker with his familiar warm smile. Thank you for your patience, he said. Now, let's make sure these go to those who need them most. Grace Walker nodded, her curiosity piqued. What would you like us to do, Mr. Hayes? She asked. Ethan Hayes gestured toward the boxes. I want these items delivered to the local homeless shelter, he said. Clothing, accessories, and anything else that might help someone rebuild their life. Can you arrange that? Grace Walker's face lit up with admiration. Absolutely, sir, she said. That's incredibly generous of you. The customers in the store began clapping, their applause growing louder as Ethan Hayes' generosity sank in. Some even cheered, their voices filled with genuine respect and admiration for what they had just witnessed. A man stepped forward, his voice rising above the applause. You're a true inspiration, he said. It's not every day you see someone use their success, of his success to make such a big difference. Ethan Hayes smiled humbly. It's not about success, he said. It's about remembering that we all have the power to help others, whether big or small. Chloe Davis, standing off to the side, felt her cheeks flush as his words hit her. She had spent the entire day judging someone based on appearances, and now she realized how wrong she had been. Summoning her courage, she stepped forward. Mr. Hayes, she began hesitantly, her voice trembling. I just want to say that I'm sorry for everything. I judged you, and that was wrong. You've taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Ethan Hayes turned to her, his expression kind but firm. Thank you for saying that, he said. But remember, it's not just about what you say. It's about what you do. Keep treating people with respect, whether they buy out the store or not. Chloe Davis nodded quickly, bowing her head in humility. I will, she promised. I'll do better. As the store employees began arranging the donation delivery, Ethan Hayes turned his attention to the customers. Thank you all for your support today, he said warmly. You've reminded me of the power of kindness when it comes from the heart. The crowd cheered again, some customers stepping forward to shake his hand or take pictures. Ethan Hayes, always humble, obliged politely, ensuring his focus remained on the act of helping others rather than basking in the spotlight. Outside the store, a delivery truck had arrived, ready to transport the donated goods to the shelter. Ethan Hayes personally helped load the boxes, his quiet dedication inspiring everyone around him. Grace Walker stood nearby, watching him with admiration. "You know," she said, "you didn't have to do all of this. But the fact that you did, it changes everything." Ethan Hayes paused, setting a box down on his knee. "The truth is," he said thoughtfully, "we all have more power than we realize. It doesn't take much to make a difference. Just a choice." As the last box was loaded onto the truck, Ethan Hayes stepped back and watched it drive away, knowing it would bring hope and support to those who needed it most. He turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the faces of customers, employees, and even Chloe Davis, who now seemed truly changed. "What kind of world do we want to live in?" he asked, his voice steady but full of emotion. "It starts with how we treat each other. One person, one act of kindness at a time." The crowd stood in silence for a moment, his words sinking in. Then, slowly, they erupted into applause again, their respect for Ethan Hayes reaching new heights. As Ethan Hayes stepped back toward the store, Grace Walker stopped him. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for today, but for showing us what really matters." Ethan Hayes smiled. "Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists," he replied. "Take care, Grace." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the store and everyone in it forever changed. As Ethan Hayes exited the store, the golden light of sunset reflected off the glass doors. Customers and employees watched him leave, their faces a mix of admiration and contemplation. The energy inside the store had completely shifted, from judgment and arrogance to humility and hope. The donation truck rolled down the street, a tangible reminder of the ripple effect of one act of kindness. Chloe Davis remained behind the counter, her usual confidence replaced by quiet reflection. She glanced at Grace Walker, who had handled the situation with professionalism and kindness the entire time. Chloe Davis took a deep breath and turned to her colleague. "Career. Grace," she said softly, "thank you for setting an example today. I've learned a lot." Grace Walker smiled warmly, her eyes kind. "It's never too late to learn," she said. "What matters is what you do next." Outside, Ethan Hayes stood at the curb, scrolling through his phone. He quickly made a call to confirm that the shelter had received the donation and that everything was in order. The person on the other end expressed deep gratitude, their voice filled with emotion. Ethan Hayes smiled. "I'm glad we could make a difference," he said before hanging up. As he put his phone away, a middle-aged man who had been watching everything unfold cautiously approached him. "Mr. Hayes," the man began, "I just wanted to say thank you. What you did in there, it was truly inspiring." Ethan Hayes looked at him, his expression humble. "Thank you," he replied. "But remember, it's not about me. It's about what all of us can do. Every small act of kindness matters." The man nodded thoughtfully. "You're right," he said. "I'll remember that." Back inside the store, the staff began tidying up after the day's events. The atmosphere had lightened, as if the tension had been washed away by Ethan Hayes' actions. Customers lingered, chatting amongst themselves, some smiling, others reflecting on what they had witnessed. A woman who had remained silent until now stepped up to Chloe Davis at the counter. "You know," she said gently, "we've all made mistakes. But what matters is how we move forward. I hope today changes things for you." Chloe Davis nodded, her eyes glistening. "It already has," she admitted. "I will do better." As Ethan Hayes walked away from the store, his steps calm and unhurried, he passed by a small park nearby. He paused for a moment, watching children play and families enjoy the evening. It reminded him why he did what he did. Not for recognition, but because every act of kindness had the power to plant a seed of hope. A little girl suddenly ran up to him, holding a flower she had picked. "Here," she said with a bright smile, offering it to him. "For you." Ethan Hayes crouched down, accepting the flower with a warm smile. "Thank you," he said softly. "This means a lot." As the girl ran back to her parents, Ethan Hayes stood up, still holding the flower. He gazed at it for a moment before tucking it into his coat pocket. A small yet powerful reminder of the impact of human connection. Meanwhile, back at the store, Grace Walker and the remaining employees gathered at the counter. Today was different. one of the younger employees said, breaking the silence. I've never seen anything like it. Grace Walker nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's a reminder, she said, that no matter how ordinary our day seems, we always have the choice to make it special for someone else, if not for ourselves. Chloe Davis lifted her head from the counter, her voice quiet but determined. I'll remember that, she said. I want to be better. As night fell, the story of what had happened in the store began to spread. Customers shared their experiences with friends and family, some posting about it on social media. Videos of Ethan Hayes' actions surfaced online, quickly going viral as people around the world were inspired by his humility and generosity. Ethan Hayes buys out store to donate to shelter became a trending headline, but for Ethan Hayes, it was never about the attention. It was about the lives he had touched, the families he had helped. The store employees had learned a valuable lesson, and strangers left with a renewed belief in kindness. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Ethan Hayes continued his walk, blending back into the rhythm of the city. His actions that day may have seemed simple, but their impact would ripple far beyond what anyone could imagine. It was a reminder that true wealth is not measured by what you have, but by what you give.